Hello and welcome to the Community Voice. I'm Fara Sax. My guest today, we're going to talk about cyber threats and financial fraud, which are very real. My guest today is Cruz. He's the Chief Information Officer at EdFed, and he's going to share how to protect yourself and your loved ones from all of this happening and falling victim, which is so real and happening in our community and across the world.
Yeah.
Louis, thank you so much for joining me. And you've been with EdFed a long time, I learned. We're both little dinosaurs, aren't we?
I guess so, Farah. You know, it just kind of creeps up on you. And, all of a sudden you look back and you've been with the company for so long. But, I've loved every step of it. And cybersecurity is just something I'm very passionate about. I love to talk about it. I love to teach people about it. Because I believe it's super important for everyone to be familiar with that topic and protect themselves. Yeah.
And absolutely, that's your job, is to protect your organization and its members and against, like I said, cyber threats and financial fraud. Cybersecurity is a growing concern for individuals and organizations alike. In layman's terms, what are we talking about when we're saying cybersecurity as it relates to your industry?
Yeah, so I'm glad you made that distinction that it's individuals and organizations alike, because the way you kind of see cybersecurity is different for both of those. And when we refer to cybersecurity, we're really talking about protecting ourselves online, right? Our identity and our financial security online, because that's really what these cyber criminals are going after these days. It's your identity and your personal data and your money. And so for individuals, that looks like, you get taught, probably when you were younger, you were taught by your parents that, if you're walking down a crowded street, if you're ladies, you're going to hold on to your purse tight, gentlemen, you're going to mind your wallet in your back pocket or something like that. And that's physical security. But when it comes to cybersecurity, no one's really teaching that. No one's teaching you what things to download, what's safe to click on the internet. And so it's super important for those things to be talked about. But from an organization point of view, it's really about something called the CIA triad, and that's the CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And that's really what we focus on as organizations, protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of our data and our systems that we provide to run the organization.
And why is it important for us to talk about cybersecurity and to educate the public about this topic?
Yeah, I can't emphasize how important it is, because we live in such a connected world, right? Everything is connected to the internet today. And even if we wanted to, right, we can't avoid technology. We can't avoid the internet. And even if someone was able to do that, however unlikely, they would still be at risk today, because we have to provide our data to our employers, to our healthcare organizations, to financial institutions, heck, even to cell phone and internet providers, right? And speaking of which, there was just a major data breach from AT&T, and 70 million Americans were impacted by that. They had their social security number and all sorts of other personal information that was leaked to cyber criminals. And so it's really difficult for us to avoid, just not being a part or being involved with this. We have to do everything we can. And in fact, if we can bring up the first slide, because last year there was over 2,300 cyber attacks that impacted Americans, right? Large-scale cyber attacks. And from that, the cost to Americans keeps rising year over year. The FBI tracks these statistics, and last year there was $12.5 billion in losses to Americans. And that number is just going to keep rising and rising. And the worst part about this, Farah, is that that number is largely underrepresented, because most people are too ashamed to report that they fell for a cybercrime or for a scam. And and a lot of people also don't even know that you can report that type of a thing.
Who are these cyber criminals, and why do they do what they do? It just seems like such a nuisance and so unnecessary in the mindset that we're both in right now. What's happening?
Yeah, so good question. This is not your stereotypical hacker of the 90s, right? It's not some person in a dark hoodie working in their basement surrounded by computer screens, right? That is not the thing anymore, right? Back then, hackers used to work and do what they did almost exclusively for recognition, right? They wanted to be recognized by their peers and by the authorities as, someone who could do this.
It almost seems like it's like graffiti, when they name themselves what they graffiti. And
So back then it was a lot like that, right? They would hack a website. They would put their name, their tagline or whatever they called themselves on the website, and they would give a shout out to their friends, right? And that was it. They would deface a website. Today, it's all about financial gain, right? So hackers or the cyber criminals, which is what I like to call them, they're criminals. It's all about, stealing money and stealing identities or data. And it's really organized crime, right? They work in established organized rings. And a lot of times it's sponsored by nation states that are kind of guiding and directing these groups of hackers to, perpetrate these cyber crimes against people and against companies.
And EdFed is doing some remarkable work right now. You have a webinar up and coming on Saturday, June 29th, between 11 and 12 a.m., 12 p.m., that folks can get involved with. And the information's on the bottom to register for the webinar that's up and coming. So explain the differences between phishing, malware, ransomware, and other kinds of cyber attacks, because they're just buzzwords. And how do we differentiate that and know what's going on as we possibly can become victims?
Yeah, there's so many different types of ways that these cyber criminals can get to us. I'll start with phishing. Phishing is really a subcategory of something called social engineering, right? And social engineering, you can think of that as just psychological manipulation. These cyber criminals are experts at manipulating individuals to make them fall for their scams and their schemes.
And how is that happening? Is this happening through a phone call? Is this happening through a text? Is it happening through an email? How do they perpetrate?
All three. I mean, sometimes it even happens in person, but predominantly it happens through email. That's what phishing is, right? Phishing is when a cyber criminal sends you an email to try to trick you into either clicking on a link or downloading an attachment or following their instructions, right? To then, take your money or take your personal data. It can also happen, like I said, through text messages. A lot of times we get these text messages, asking us to buy gift cards. If you work for an organization, that might look like your CEO sending you a text message saying, hey, I need you to do me a favor. Why don't you go buy me, 30 or 40 gift cards, and then I'll give you more instructions after that.
It seems like it can go on and on and on. It can be an older woman. It could be an elderly man. It could be young people. It runs the gamut of who the victim could possibly be.
Yeah.
So how do you differentiate and know when to say, something's fishy going on here in this phishing world?
Yeah, everyone gets targeted. I'll say that.
Social security, your address, your phone number, your bank account.
So I say everyone gets targeted, but there is a group of people who are most impacted by this, right? And
the vulnerable.
Yeah, well, it's actually people, individuals who are age 60 and older that are most impacted by this. And I'll tell you why that is. It's not because they're the ones that are falling for it most often, right? Although, more elderly people may be more vulnerable to this types of schemes, but it's really because, what do we say? What are the cyber criminals after? They're after financial gain, right, and information. And where is the biggest concentration of wealth? What age group is that with, right? It's 60 and older that have the biggest concentration of wealth in the country. And so the cyber criminals, they may be targeting them, but it's not necessarily that they're targeting them, it's that they're most impacted, because when one of them falls for one of these schemes, they can lose $10,000, they can lose $100,000, right? Cyber criminals get more rich through that. But younger folks are also impacted by this. Gen Z is very comfortable with technology. They grew up with it since they were very small. And so, they just fall for other types of scams on the internet as well.
And malware?
So malware. Malware is really what we refer to as viruses and code that could be downloaded to your computer and executed. There's many different categories and classes of malware. But phishing is how malware gets delivered most of the time, right? A hacker or a cyber criminal send you an email. That email might contain a link or an attachment that can get malware installed in your computer. And then what the malware could do is either collect your sensitive data, files and whatnot, and send that to the cyber criminals, or it can, watch all the keys that you're typing, what websites you're visiting, and send that information to the hackers. And like that, they can steal your password to your bank account and other sensitive information as well.
And ransomware.
Well, ransomware is actually what impacts the financial institutions the most, and most large organizations. It's probably the most prevalent cyber attack that's impacting not just financial institutions, but government organizations, healthcare providers, and large organizations. The more critical the service an organization provides, the more attractive the target for a cyber criminal for ransomware. And what ransomware is a hacker is able to get into your, break through your security, either by sending a phishing email and getting one of your employees to fall for that and install that malware inside of your organization. And then the ransomware will either encrypt a whole bunch of data in your environment, or the cyber criminal will take that data and upload it to one of their servers. And essentially, the ransomware part of it is that they extort you for money. So they'll say, we won't decrypt your data, or we'll hold your data on our servers, and we're going to release that data unless you pay us a certain sum of money.
It gets crazier and crazier, doesn't it?
And
really go down the rabbit hole. And the worst part of it is?
The worst part of it is that you're working with criminals. And so,
you're working against criminals.
Well, when you're in this ransomware negotiation, you're working with criminals. And, there's that saying, there's no honor among thieves. So even if your company decides that they're going to pay a ransom to clear up their data, that doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily release your data or give you back your data, right? You can pay the ransom and they may still release it to the internet or sell it on the dark web.
Amazing. It's amazing. What is the most common type of cyber crime that you're seeing? So
it's social engineering by far, right? Because that's kind of like the first step. And when we talk about social engineering, phishing, email social engineering is the most common type. But it really depends kind of on the age group or the generation, what is most prevalent for each age group. So when you're talking about younger generations, you're talking about maybe social media scams, ads on social media that advertise products for 75% off. And then the cyber criminal wants you to pay them directly through Zelle or some other means, right? That's where the person can't recover their money back once they've sent it, and then they never get what they paid for. There's also employment scams. That's another popular one for younger generations.
What is that?
So these cyber criminals will post fake job listings, particularly for remote work and work where there's little to no experience required. They usually attract younger generations by offering high pay, very flexible schedules. And then the whole thing of it is that they want you to apply, because when you apply, you're providing all of your personal data.
All your information.
Yeah, and so you're just giving it to them at that point.
How do we protect ourselves?
Yeah.
Besides coming to your webinar on June 29th between 11 and 12.
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of things that we can do to protect ourselves. Email security, like being very conscious about how you read your email and what you open is one of the most important things. Because like we talked about, phishing and social engineering through phishing and email is the most common way for cyber criminals to get you. And so don't open emails that where you don't know where they came from. Don't click on links or attachments, certainly, for emails you weren't expecting.
Right.
And even if you get an email from someone you do know, if that email contains information or what's in the body of the email seems way out of character or weird for the person who sent it to you, you got to question that. Right? Call that person and say, did you send this to me? Because one of the most common things that happens is that hackers will take over somebody's email account and then send to their contact list, right? Because you know this person, you're getting an email from someone you know, and then you fall for that.
It could go in so many directions.
Yeah, it certainly can.
What is the current cybersecurity landscape in the credit union industry, for example?
So that is credit unions, like any other financial institution, right? Banks and other types of financial institutions have those two things that the cyber criminals want most, right? They have all your personal and financial data, and they have your money, right? So it makes them a particularly attractive target for these cyber criminals. And so ransomware is one of the biggest threats to credit unions and other financial institutions, because the cyber criminals get two things from you. They get that data, right? And then they can get money because they know that financial institutions, generally have deeper pockets. Most recently, I think that another concerning thing that we're seeing now is our vendors and our suppliers, them getting breached and hacked, because a lot of times we have to work with third parties in order to provide the services that we provide. And sometimes those third parties get a certain amount of data and information, and if they're not protecting the data to the same standards that we are, that could be a threat. And so we have to work closely with our suppliers and our third parties to ensure that they're adhering to the same security standards that we are.
Wow. And in the last 19 years, you've had some key challenges that you do face as a CIO of the largest credit union in Miami. What are some of those challenges?
Yeah, it's definitely a growing organization, and we've been growing for quite some time now, getting larger and larger. As you get larger, your footprint and how cyber criminals see you becomes very different, and you start to become a bigger and a bigger target. But as you're aware, we are in South Florida. It is a very diverse and vibrant community, but it's also a high-intensity financial crime community as designated by the U.S. government. What that means is that we are susceptible here in South Florida to a lot more financial fraud, money laundering, ID theft, all of these things. They happen a lot more here in South Florida. And so we want to provide members of EdFed with a contemporary experience, right? We want to provide them with a frictionless experience. However, we have to balance that against, the fact that we're a primary target for these cyber criminals. And so keeping up with the evolving threat landscape, it's really one of the largest challenges that I have.
What measures are in place for EdFed, for its members, for, let's just say, fraudulent activities?
Yeah, we're actually very lucky that the senior management team at the credit union takes cybersecurity very seriously. And so it's not just one thing that we're doing, it's a layered approach. Some of the measures that we're taking, we're not going to talk about all of them because there's so many, but some of the measures that we're taking, for example, is we're monitoring the dark web. And the dark web, I'll explain that briefly. It's not some mysterious, weird place. It's kind of like a site on the internet that's not indexed by search engines. So you can't just search Google and get to somewhere in the dark web. If you want to compare that to the physical world, it's like having like a back alley in a warehouse district where all the criminals meet to do their illicit activities. It's not on the map, and you can't get there by putting in an address on Google Maps or anything like that. So the same thing, dark web. It's kind of there's marketplaces where these criminals exchange information that they've stolen. They sell information, they trade it there. So we monitor that, and we look for our members' information. And if we see our members' information on the dark web, for example, hackers may have a list of credit card numbers that belong to our members. We take immediate action to make sure that those credit cards are, reissued with the new credit card numbers to our members, and that the old ones are blocked, so that if those cyber criminals are able to sell that information on the dark web, it really can't be used to affect our members.
And you have over 100,000 members.
Yeah, 100,000 members.
Kudos to EdFed for that. That's wonderful. And what do you do to protect those risks? Like you monitor, and what are some of the best practices for online security?
Yeah. So in other
words, you don't know, you don't answer the email if it looks fishy.
Yeah. So be careful with email security. We talked about that one already. Right. But we also said that phishing can come through text and voice calls. And one of the things that's going on today is that AI is becoming a very large part of cybersecurity as well. And so with today's technology, these cyber criminals can clone voices, and they're using that with voice phishing to trick people, and so they're using that for, extortion, and, they're doing fake kidnappings where they'll clone the voice of a parent or a child, and then, let's say they clone the voice of a child, and that child calls the parent and says that they've been kidnapped, right? And so now we're starting to see how more advanced technology, these cyber criminals are using that, like AI and other types of technologies, to continue their nefarious activities, and it's just very difficult to stay on top of it.
Absolutely. And we there's a rise of digital banking and online banking to really online services to really make it so convenient. What do you do to implement that so that your folks are all safe and get the job done without, and very convenient in your 8 locations?
Yeah, safe and secure. That's how we like it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, the rise of digital banking, right? That's it's actually been around for 30 years. I started thinking about this, and the first online banking was brought online in 1994 by Stanford University's credit union, Stanford Federal Credit Union, right? And it was very rudimentary back then, right? Think of the internet in 1994, right? Like America Online, I don't know, 3.0, 2.0, whatever.
And the computers were loud and hot and took up the whole room.
And you had the modems with the little buzzing noise and all that. But that's how
you got mail.
Online banking was done back then. And Stanford Federal Credit Union was the first one to put it in 30 years ago. EdFed, we put in our digital banking system in the early 2000s. And so, a little over 20 years ago at this point. And we consider it a very mature technology at this point. And so, yeah, cybersecurity requirements for those types of technology are there. It requires strong encryption, making sure that our members use strong passwords, use other types of advanced technologies, and constantly scanning the systems to make sure that any weaknesses that we discover are fixed immediately.
Absolutely. This is great, to feel secure. That's what it's all about. Success stories. Let's talk about success stories of how EdFed might have implemented or averted a problem in this wonderful malware, phishing, cybersecurity, financial fraud.
Phishing, we'll pick that one.
Okay, I just let you pick it.
Yeah, so we'll do this. One of the things that we're doing to make sure that our members are protected, right? So we'll consider this a success story, is we can do a lot internally to prevent phishing emails from getting to our employees, right? We have all sorts of security measures in place. We have a strong training program to make sure that employees understand what phishing emails look like and that they don't click on those, even if they get to the inbox. But there's really little we can do to protect our members from getting phishing emails in their personal inboxes, right? So what we are doing is we are scanning the entire internet for fake EdFed 24/7, right, which is our digital banking platform websites. And so what the hackers and these cyber criminals will do is send phishing emails to our members, and that'll contain a link to a fake digital banking website. And what these criminals will go, and they're very good, they'll clone our entire website, and they'll create a new website that looks identical to ours. And then that phishing link will send our members to that fake website, and then they'll try to convince the member to log in, either by telling them in the phishing email, hey, we detected fraud on your account. We need you to log in to verify this activity, right? They scare them, manipulation tactics. And so what we're doing is scanning the internet to try to find these fake websites before our members can get to them. So when they click on those links, they're useless.
That's perfect. And what advice in the time that we have left would you give individuals to better protect themselves against these threats?
Yeah, so use strong passwords, strong and long. The longer the password, the better, okay? And then use multi-factor authentication. So if we could bring up that other slide, I'll kind of explain this briefly. Multi-factor authentication, it's also known as MFA, or sometimes it's called 2FA. And it's really multiple factors to authenticate your identity, right? And so you can either have something which could be like a password, or something you have, which could be like a key or a smartphone where you get a code on it, right, texted to you, or it's something you are, right? So something you know, something you have, or something you are. Something you are could be like a fingerprint or a facial scan, right? And the thing with MFA is you have to have 2 of those in order to validate your identity and get through to log in. And so mostly all systems that you log into nowadays support MFA, and so we encourage that you enable that and use it. Another thing that I'll say for people to protect themselves is assume that your information is already out there. Too many large companies have been breached, and it's just getting worse and worse, right? I could rattle off the top of my head, 5 or 6 companies where they've had over 100 million people's information that has been out there, been exposed. There are about 360 million or so people that live in the United States. And I think last year there was like 343 million who had their information exposed on the internet due to breaches of large companies. So assume your information is out there, and the way you protect yourself from that is if a company notifies you that you've been part of a breach, they're required to provide credit monitoring services. Take them up on that offer, right?
Absolutely.
Take them up on that offer.
It's better to err on the side of caution than anything else. And I just want to thank you for your time because we're out of time.
Oh, it's fine.
But it is amazing how it flies, right? But webinar is happening June 29th between 11 and 12, and all the information is on the bottom. And again, if you're interested in becoming a member of EdFed and join the 100,000 strong other members who have saved and earned, becoming a member is very, very easy. Just visit 88 of their branch locations, including their first location in Broward County, which is currently open in Miramar off the Miramar Park Place Shopping Center. Right. So thank you so much again for joining me today. And it was a pleasure. I learned so much, and to keep our identities and ourselves and our loved ones safe.
Thank you, Fara. I appreciate it. I really had a great time talking to you today.
I did too. It's the first time we've met, and your team is amazing. EdFed is a great company. They are wonderful sponsors and supporters of community newspapers over the year, and your team is phenomenal, and personalized service is what it's all about, and keeping us safe in our community. So thank you for joining me, and I want to thank you for joining us today on The Community Voice. I'm Fara Sax. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Have a great day. And a special thank you to Julian Chang, who now has a second location in Pinecrest. Go visit his boutique for all your clothing and accessory needs.